Hey everybody, welcome to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. It's Samuel Allred on the mic, and today we are going to talk about all the things that you need to start deer hunting. When I started deer hunting, I was a little bit overwhelmed by all the gear that was out there, and I wasn't sure which things I needed to go out and buy and which things I could do without. So today I want to give you a list of the things that I bring out into the field when I'm deer hunting so that you can have a good idea of what things you really need and what things you might be able to leave at home or on the shelf. The first thing that I recommend for deer hunters is a sturdy pair of boots. Now, these could be work boots, these could be leather hiking boots, these could be dedicated hunting boots, but they need to keep your feet warm and dry and protected when you're out in the field. If you don't have a good pair of boots to wear, I would recommend something like a 6 to 8 inch leather hiking boot or hunting boot. I like the ones that are Gore-Tex lined, especially because they keep your feet really nice and dry. With a 6 to 8 inch leather hiking or hunting boot, you can do most things that you need to do when you're hunting. I've used boots like this for elk hunting, for deer hunting. I've used them in the winter snowshoeing with gaiters. They're just not going to let you down, and you can adapt what you wear with them to your different situations and environments. Now, another boot that is favored, especially among whitetail hunters, is a high rubber boot. Rubber boots are said to leave less scent when you're walking around than leather boots, which can help you avoid being detected by deer. Now, rubber boots are also nice for if you're walking through streams, if you're walking through wet brush or mud. The downside of rubber boots is that they tend to not be as comfortable as leather boots. So if you are walking further distances or hiking all day, they might not be as good of a choice. But if you've just got a short distance to walk through a field or you're hunting on the farm, they could be a good choice for you. Whatever boots you choose, again, you just want to make sure that they keep your feet warm, they keep your feet dry, and they protect your feet so that your feet aren't damaged at the end of the hunt. Hurting or damaged feet will end your hunt quicker than just about anything else, so that's why boots are on the top of my list. The next item on my list is suitable clothing. Now, that's pretty broad, I know, but what you wear on a deer hunt really depends on your location and the environment and the time of year. If you are hunting whitetail in an early archery season, for example, down in Tennessee, when you're hunting, you might be wearing a t-shirt up top. But if you're hunting whitetail later in the season up in Wisconsin, you'll be wearing a completely different outfit. So when you're thinking about what to wear, just think about the style of hunting you're doing, what the temperatures are going to be, and then what you have. If you're going to go out and sit in a tree stand for hours on end, you really want some warm layers that are going to help you stay nice and comfortable without generating much body heat from movement. Now, on the other hand, if you're out and hiking around, you're going to want some layers that you can take on and off as necessary so that you can stay warm throughout the day without sweating or overheating or anything like that. Now, one question that you might ask when you're starting out is, do I need camouflage clothing? And I think camouflage is a little overhyped. Camouflage can certainly be helpful, and in certain situations, it may increase your odds of success. But for a new hunter, I think it's more important to get out and start learning how to hunt, start learning how to find animals, start learning how to manage your scent and play the wind than it is to have the perfect camouflage clothing. So I think if you're a new hunter, you should think about what you have, try and dress in some drab colors. I would avoid blue. Deer are supposed to see blue pretty well. But at the end of the day, don't worry too much about what you're wearing and just go out and hunt. If you think about photos from not so long ago, if you think about our great-grandparents, they were out there hunting deer in blue jeans and red flannel. So I think you're going to be just fine in some drab clothing. And if you want to invest in camo in the future, go for it. You should also consider your hunter's orange requirements for your location. Different states have different requirements on how much hunter's orange you need to wear. Some places you can wear just a orange cap. Other places you might need a full hunter's orange vest. And some places you don't need hunter's orange at all. So just look up your hunting regulations and get familiar with them. And if you need some hunter's orange, you can always go to a Walmart and buy a $10 vest and just throw that on over whatever you're wearing, and you'll probably be good to go. All right, the next item on my list is your weapon system. Now, I call it a weapon system because it's really more than just a rifle or just a bow. It's your rifle, it's your optic or sight, it's your sling or other accessories, and it's your ammunition that's matched for your rifle or your weapon. All of these components have to work together properly for success. There are many weapons that you can use to kill a deer. You can use a rifle, you can use a shotgun, you can use a bow. There's others, but those are the main ones. If you are starting out deer hunting, I would recommend that you think about what you already have. If you have a rifle, great. See if you can hunt with that. If you have a bow, great. See if you can hunt with that. Again, it's really more important that you get out and start hunting and start learning the land and learning about the animals than it is what specifically you're hunting with. Now, I'll briefly touch on what rifle cartridges are suitable for hunting deer. On the low end, most people will agree that a 243 is suitable for hunting deer in reasonable ranges. And then you can really go as high as you want after that. You're really just playing with recoil and how expensive the cartridges are and shootability. You can even use cartridges smaller than a 243, although they may not be legal in some states. You should also check your state regulations and your local area regulations. They may have restrictions on what type of cartridges you use, whether it's caliber restrictions or cartridge case type restrictions. So there are some states where you can only use straight-walled cartridges. So you want to make sure you know your local regulations. Other places you'll only be allowed to hunt with a shotgun. That's great too. I would not recommend a buckshot. It's not a very reliable killer, but load your shotgun up with some slugs, whether it's 12 or 20 gauge, and put a red dot on that or put a scope on it, and you will be good to go. As far as archery equipment goes, I would recommend that you go ask someone at an archery pro shop or at your local sporting goods store if they have a pro shop or an archery area. They can probably help you out figuring out what sort of draw weight and arrow weight and spine and all those things that you need to make an effective deer hunting archery setup. I think more important than what weapon you have or what caliber you have or what bow you're shooting is that you are comfortable with your weapon system, that you've gone out and you've tested it with your chosen optic, you've tested it with your chosen load, that you can hit your target, and that you know what ranges you are effective at. When I first started deer hunting, I had a Winchester 30-30 that I got from my grandpa, and I didn't have an optic for it, so I was only running open sights, and I could really only shoot a 6-inch group at 100 yards. So my effective range was well under 100 yards. I really only felt comfortable with it out to maybe 80 yards. Well, I didn't let that stop me. I went out and hunted anyway, and on the afternoon of my first day ever deer hunting, I got an opportunity on public land to shoot a deer at 25 yards. And that was perfect for my open sight Winchester 30-30. So I took the shot, I killed the deer, and I'm just glad that I didn't let not having the newest weapon or the best long-range weapon or whatever it was hold me back from going out and having that experience. A quick note on rifle scopes before we move on. If you're looking for a rifle scope and you're just starting out, I would recommend something that's in the 3 to 9 magnification range, maybe a 2.5 to 10 magnification with a 40 millimeter objective lens. Those are kind of your most common rifle scopes. You really don't need a whole lot more magnification. If you want it, you can get it, but sometimes it's important to have that low end as well for closer shots. And most people agree that a 3-9 will cover you in 80-90% of hunting scenarios. So that's something that I would look for if you're overwhelmed by just all the different options out there. A 3-9 or a 2.5 to 10 and a 40 millimeter objective lens is probably going to do you just fine. All right, the next things that I always bring with me when I'm deer hunting are navigational tools. And these days, my navigational tools are my phone, a compass, and then printed maps. I use my phone most of the time, especially when I'm day hunting and not going to be out for very long. On my phone, I use onX Hunt, which is an app that shows you private and public land. It shows you all sorts of roads. It shows you terrain and topography, and it gives you satellite images. onX Hunt is a really great app. Of all the things that I might tell you you don't need when you're starting out deer hunting, I actually would recommend onX Hunt. It's maybe $35 a year, and the information it gives you is just invaluable, both for when you're in the field and also for when you're trying to find a place to hunt. When I'm in the field, I usually download onX Maps onto my phone, and then I can use those maps with my GPS locator on my phone to get around. Now, I also bring a compass. A compass is really helpful for a couple of reasons. One, if I need to conserve my phone battery, I'll go ahead and use my compass more often. I'll just maybe check it quickly with my phone, and then I can follow my compass. Two, if I'm in thick brush where I really can't see very far, it's really nice to have a compass so you can check which direction you need to go using your map or using your phone, and then you can just follow your compass through thick brush. I'm pretty directionally challenged, so it's really helpful to have a compass in those types of situations. And lastly, a compass can help you out in an emergency. Before I go out somewhere, I will generally look at the map and try to get an understanding of where the area is that I'm hunting in relation to other man-made features. So say I'm hunting and I know that to the north there's a highway that runs across most of the area that I'm hunting, or I know that southwest there's a city. That way, if I get lost in the woods, or my phone battery runs out, or I lose my map, whatever happens, I know that if I go north long enough, I'll hit a highway and someone can pick me up. So that's another great reason to have a compass just besides day-to-day navigating. My last navigational tool is actual printed maps. When I'm going on a longer trip for multiple days, or going to a place where I might run out of phone battery or whatever it is, maybe just as a backup, I will print out some actual maps. Sometimes I'll print these from onX Hunt. You don't need onX. You could print them from Google Earth or buy them at a ranger station or get them at REI or something. But sometimes it is helpful to have physical maps. And really, it's a good idea just as a backup in most situations. Now, if you're hunting the family farm, you obviously won't need those same navigational tools because you'll probably be much more familiar with it. But if you're going somewhere new or going somewhere where you could cover a lot of ground, I would always recommend to have some sort of map and a compass, an actual physical compass in your pack. The next item I always keep in my pack when I'm deer hunting is a first aid kit. Now, hunting is inherently more dangerous than normal life. So it's important to take responsibility for yourself and others and be prepared. Thankfully, if you're being safe, you're probably going to hunt injury-free. The most common sorts of injuries on a hunt would probably be things like cutting your finger when you're processing an animal. And hopefully that won't be life-threatening, but it is nice to have something in your backpack to go ahead and bandage that up and be able to just keep going on without risking infection. You might also have issues like blisters on the trail, or if you're cooking in camp, cooking burns are actually a very common thing when camping. So your first aid kit will mostly be for smaller injuries, but it's not a bad idea to be prepared for the bigger ones as well. If you don't know what to put in your first aid kit, I would recommend that you go to the Mountain Tough website. That's mtntough.com, and look up an article called Building a Hunting First Aid Kit, a Medical Perspective. Now, I'm not affiliated with them, but that's a great resource telling you what you should put in your first aid kit and why. Sometimes you'll buy a first aid kit from the store and you open it up later and it's like 95% Band-Aids. And that's not really helpful when you break your leg. So I would recommend checking out that article and building your own first aid kit. And then as a side note, you should probably learn how to do some basic first aid while you're at it. Another thing that I always bring with me when I'm deer hunting is a bright headlamp. And I specify bright for a reason. When I first got into deer hunting, I bought some cheap headlamps off Amazon, and they were fine, but they just weren't that bright. Well, one day I was hunting by myself and I shot a deer in the very last minutes of legal light. And I was hunting with a crossbow actually at the time. That's a whole different story, but hunting with a crossbow. And so I let the deer have some time to run off and die. And then I went out to see what blood I could find so I could blood trail the deer. Well, I couldn't find my arrow, I think because I was at ground level, and I think it just went into a bunch of weeds and bushes and stuff. And I started looking in the area where I knew I had shot the deer about 30 yards away, and I just couldn't find any blood. And at this point, it's getting dark and just getting darker by the minute, and I couldn't see any blood. And I was just racking my brain. I knew for sure that I had hit it. I heard the noise. I heard the deer run off and then stop running, meaning it had fallen over, right? And I just couldn't find any blood. So I started doing circles around the area looking for blood, couldn't find it. Finally, I started gridding the area in the direction where I knew the deer had ran. And by what felt like luck, I was able to find that deer. And once I got up to the deer, I saw on its fur or on its hair all sorts of blood. Something about the contrast between the hair and the blood. And later I found that I had heart shot that doe. And so I'm pretty sure that there was a great blood trail. And looking back on the experience, my headlamp was just not bright enough to make the blood show up on the ground to contrast and then also make some of that wet blood reflect. So after that, I went out and got a much brighter headlamp, and I would recommend you don't make that mistake and just get a bright headlamp starting out. Now, also when you're deer hunting, you may go into the woods early in the morning when it's still dark, and you may come out of the woods when it's dark, and it's really nice to have a bright headlamp. It's also nice to have a bright headlamp when you're processing a deer in the dark. The other thing is you may want to get a headlamp that has a dimming setting or a red setting, because sometimes when you're going in the dark, you want to be a little bit more stealthy, don't want to broadcast your location with a light beam. So if you can get something that dims, most modern headlamps do. Okay, so next on my list is a kill kit. And a kill kit is just a collection of items that you use once you've killed a deer and are getting ready to process it or field dress it. Now, what you have in your kill kit is sort of personal preference, but I will tell you what's in my deer hunting kill kit. So first, I keep my tags in my kill kit. Tags are just a receipt you get when you get your hunting license. So you might get a big game hunting license and then a tag for a deer or an elk tag or a turkey tag. And once you kill that animal, you need to attach your tag to that animal. So I always put my tags in my kill kit so that when I go to get my knife and other things, I won't forget them. So I've got my tags in my kill kit. I usually keep some zip ties in my kill kit. They're nice for attaching your tag to the animal or for other utility purposes. I usually keep a knife specifically for skinning the animal in my kill kit. You'll be surprised at how quickly your knife will go dull on an animal, especially if you kind of have a cheap knife. But cutting all through hair and hide and sometimes cutting around bones especially can dull your knife pretty quickly. So it's nice to have a sharpener in there so you can give it a fresh edge whenever you need to. I also keep parachute cord in my kill kit. Parachute cord is helpful for all sorts of things. If you need to drag an animal out, you might loop some parachute cord around its neck and then tie it to a stick or something and use that to drag the animal out. If you need to hang quarters of an animal in a tree or even hang up a whole animal, I've field dressed a deer before and then hung it up with parachute cord to do the rest of the skinning and quartering out. And that's a really great way to do it. So parachute cord is great for all sorts of utilities. I usually keep some of that in my kill kit, if not just in my pack. I also keep game bags in my kill kit. Game bags are cloth bags that you can put meat in, and they're usually made of a breathable material so that the meat can cool off and the outer layer can dry while still being protected from flies and dirt and other things like that. Cheaper game bags will be made of sort of a cheesecloth material, and then nicer game bags are often made of maybe a synthetic material, and they can be washed and reused. And the last thing I usually keep in my kill kit are some trash bags. I usually hunt out of a backpack, so it's nice to have some trash bags to line my pack with when I'm putting meat in there. All right, moving on. I recommend that you get a water bottle. Food is optional on a hunt, depending on the length of the hunt, but water can really make a big difference. I find that water really affects my energy levels during the hunt, and it also affects how much time it takes for me to recover after the hunt. So stay hydrated and you'll hunt better. Now, if you have all the items on the list so far, you are going to be well on your way to a good deer hunt. The next few items I'm going to recommend are technically optional, but I would highly recommend them if you can get your hands on them. So first are some binoculars. Having binoculars changes the game when you're hunting. You can see much further away. You can see through trees and through bushes when you're in thick country. And they're really helpful for finding animals before they find you. Some people would probably take binoculars before they took, half of the other things on the list. So you can go hunting without binoculars, but if you've got some or you can get some, I would highly recommend them. They really will affect your success when you're hunting. Another optional item, depending on what you're doing, is a backpack. I like to have a backpack, whether it's a smaller backpack for day hunts that I just throw a layer in and maybe my kill kit and water, or if it's a bigger backpack like my hiking backpack, which is about 65 liters. I think that's around 3,900 cubic inches. And I actually really like hunting with that bigger backpack because when I've got my gear with me, I can basically go anywhere I want and feel confident that I can get a deer out of the woods with that big backpack. If I leave my food and water in the truck or leave my layers and I go out, it's not going to be long before I'm going to want to come back to the truck. If I've got everything in my backpack, I can go hike miles and miles and miles. And then since it's big enough for me to put a whole quartered out deer in, I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to go wherever I want to hunt and be pretty much self-sufficient until I need to head back. The last thing on my list that's optional, just depending on your hunt, are some fire starters. If you're going out into a remote area or anywhere you could get lost and end up spending more time than you expected, you may want to bring some fire starters. I don't mess around with fire starters. I bring a couple different options. So I'll usually bring a lighter, maybe some matches, lint, maybe a candle, just so that I have some different options in different conditions. You can also use fire starters during a hunt. If you're cold, you can make a fire and warm up. But I usually think of them as either an emergency tool, or if I'm camping for multiple nights in a row, I might use them for cooking or things like that. All right, well, that was the last thing on my list. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful for you, and maybe it makes you a little bit more confident going out into the deer woods this season. Now, I'll leave you with a final thought, and this might sound like the opposite of what we've been talking about, but don't let gear hold you back. If you don't have the perfect gear or the newest gear or whatever it is, use what you've got and go out and hunt anyways. You're going to start learning things just by being out in the field, and you're going to have a great time even if you don't have the perfect gear. So I'll leave you with that, and I hope to see you out there.